All right. We'll go ahead and get started. I think we'll probably still have some more people trickling in. But just to get started, my name is Katie Auney. I am the Assistant Dean for External Relations here at Merrill College. Just a couple housekeeping notes before we get started. We are recording this and we'll have it up on our YouTube channel, likely up by sometime tomorrow morning. So if you do want to watch it again or you missed part of it, you can find it there. The way things will work, we're keeping this pretty informal. We're expecting not a huge group tonight, but a good sized group, but we want to make sure everyone, is able to ask questions and things. So I'm going to go through and ask our panelists some questions, but feel free to put your own questions in the chat or even just raise your hand and I will try to get to you. And we'll definitely try to allow some time at the end as well, specifically for questions. So. And then I also just wanted to mention that this is the first of 4 panels that we have this week focused on different career paths from journalism school. Tomorrow, we have one on sports journalism careers. Wednesday is focused on freelancing careers, and Thursdays is focused on government, nonprofit, and political communications careers. So if you haven't already signed up for one of those and you're interested, I encourage you to do so. They're all at the same time, and they all will be up on our YouTube channel afterwards. So. With that said, I would like to welcome our panelists this evening. One quick note, Kia Hayes was not able to make it last minute. If anyone is specifically interested in connecting with her, she's an attorney at the New Orleans Innocence Project. Feel free to shoot me a message and I'm happy to try to connect you with her. But she sends her regards that she was not able to make it after all. But I am thrilled to welcome. I'm going to go in the order that they appear on my screen here. So we've got first Jillian Vernick, who is a 2017 graduate of Merrill College. She is currently a third-year law student at Drexel University and is the Internet Public Interest Opportunities Program Clerk for the Electronic Privacy Information Center, which may be the longest job title I've ever heard. So welcome, Gillian. And then we have Brittany Lee Richardson Hadley. Brittany is a 2009 graduate of Merrill College and is currently a trademark examining attorney advisor for the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. Then we've got Rob Tricchinelli, who got his master's from Merrill in 2007. He's currently a team leader at Bloomberg Law. And finally, Janelle Lilley, who also got a master's at Merrill in 2008. And I should note she's also a member of our inaugural alumni board for the new Journalism Alumni Network that is in the process of launching. So thrilled to have Janelle as part of that effort. And until recently, she was a news anchor for KATV in Little Rock, Arkansas. So why don't we start with Janelle, and why don't you just start by telling us a little bit about what your role entails and how your law school experience sort of plays into what you do now.
Well, first of all, let me start off by saying I went to law school as a journalist. So I had been working as a journalist for years as a news anchor. And the reason I went to law school, the impetus was because I felt like people were lying to me and I couldn't prove it. And I was covering the legislature at the time in Little Rock, and it was one of those things where, you'd go up to a lawmaker and you'd say, hey, what does this bill do? How does it affect folks? And they tell you one thing, and then somebody who was completely against the bill would tell you the opposite thing. No, the law doesn't do that. It says something different. That has a completely, and you're sitting there and I'm reading the same text that both of these guys are, and I couldn't figure out what it really said. And I just got so sick of it. I was like, I'm just going to law school. And there happened to be a great night program where I was. And I signed up for the LSAT and I took it 3 weeks later and just decided that was going to be it for me. So I attended the night program while working as a full-time journalist. So if you are considering doing that, it is possible. I also had a child. I got married and had a child while in law school, and actually was pregnant when I took the bar with my second child. So, it's a busy lift, but it's possible if you're passionate about it. And I really was. It mattered to me to be able to do what I wanted to do. And I will say also, it ended up being so much more than I thought it was going to be. I thought I was just going to be able to hold lawmakers accountable, but really there's not an area that I reported on during my tenure that the law doesn't touch in some way. It is everywhere, whether you are reporting on actual trials or disputes between landlords and tenants. It's just, it touches everything. And so it's so helpful as a journalist. And so I guess to sum it all up, that's, my role, I believe, as a journalist is accountability. And I feel like the law is a tool that allows me to do that.
And how were your supervisors at the television station supportive, surprised? What was their reaction when you said you wanted to go to law school?
They were supportive. I would say, I ended up having to, so, we have deadlines in journalism. We have actual times when you're on television and you can't change those because they're live. So for the first semester of law school, your schedule's pretty much, you take, all the lawyers will tell you, everyone takes the same classes. It doesn't even matter what school you're at. You all take the same classes. You're taking contracts, you're doing it all. And so those classes were at 5:30, and I had a 6 o'clock broadcast. So I would be live at 5. I would pre-tape my intro and tag for 6, and I would shoot off to class. And they were awesome. All of the managers were really helpful and allowing my schedule to have that small flexibility. I still had to get the same amount of work done in 30-minute period, less, but they accommodated me in that way. And honestly, I think they had the foresight to see the benefit of it. There were times, and I will say, even as a journalist working and a lawyer working while a journalist, I'll have my boss come to me and be like, "Hey, Janelle, just a quick question, has nothing to do with reporting it. They just want to know stuff about the law and in their personal life." So it does help a lot of ways.
That's awesome. Rob, you are also currently working as a journalist. Could you talk a little bit about what you do now and how you've used your law degree in that role?
Yes, I am a working journalist at Bloomberg Law. I'm an editor. I'm on a team of about 25. There's about five or six editors and about 20 reporters on our team. Our newsroom is set up where we cover various topical areas in the law. So, health, IP, corporate, environment, tax. And my team, all we do is write cases. And so there are lots of legal journalists out there, and my team is mostly folks with law degrees, actually, but it's pretty rare in that regard. But there is like a whole universe of legal journalism where you don't necessarily read it outside of a paywall too much. Like a lot of what we're writing doesn't break through into the collective consciousness so much. The cat lawyer on Zoom definitely did, and we were there early for that. But there are a few. There are a few times that it does break through, but there are definitely lots of opportunities for folks who, want to stay in journalism, but who do have a law degree out of it. It can be, being a law student and going to law school is certainly a lot of work. I think most of the time folks who are going to law school kind of commit to that career change, but I'm sort of living proof that if you go to law school and still want to be a journalist, you can do it.
Wonderful. Brittany, you are currently working as a lawyer. You're our practicing lawyer on the panel this evening. Could you talk a little bit about what you currently do?
Sure. I just want to kind of note something that to what Rob just said. It's funny, when I was in school, journalism school, I wanted to be a sideline sports reporter, and I did an internship with multiple entities, and I ended up working with one of those sideline sports reporters, and I told her what my interest was. We stayed in contact, and I told her about how I was thinking about going to law school, and she said, "If you go to law school, you will not come back to journalism. They make too much money." So just kind of giving a little bit of background. So like I said, I wanted to be a sideline sports reporter, but then while I was in school, the Michael Vick situation happened. And that really bothered me. I admired him as an athlete. And so for him to, get in this type of trouble that caused him to go to jail for, and, you're so talented, and to be involved in something like this bothered me. And I just felt like if he had a few more people in his corner, not maybe yes people, I don't know, obviously his personals, but I just felt like if he had a little more mentorship or guidance from someone who knew the law very well, that maybe this wouldn't have happened and he could have stayed on the field. So that is what kind of turned me from wanting to be a sideline sports reporter to wanting to go to law school. And then fast forward, while in law school, I really fell in love with intellectual property. I was already very interested because of copyright. I like to write poetry and I love entertainment and music. And then trademark also relates to that. So I, went through law school, made the decision I was going to be an IP law or sports and entertainment, whichever worked out. And I currently work for the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office as a trademark attorney, which I really like on a day-to-day basis. I'm writing every single day. So I would say that that's something that I really gained from being in the J school, really learning to write and write well and write in a way that, what do you say, like the average person can understand, right? And not using a whole bunch of legal jargon or language that people wouldn't get, because people who are applying for trademarks, they're attorneys, and then there's also pro se applicants. So I think that that is one of the biggest things being in the J school has helped me in my career, being able to write well for everyone.
Great, thank you. And Jillian is currently in law school. But if you could talk a little bit about, why did you decide to go to law school? And I think the job that you're taking after you graduate is really a great combination, as we were talking about before, really combining journalism and law. So if you could talk a little bit about that as well, what you'll be doing after you graduate.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm a 3L right now. And I took, let's say I graduated in 2017. So I took a year between graduation and going to school, and I did a gap year and taught English in Spain. And my parents, before I left, were just like, I need you to take the LSATs. Just, you can defer if you need to, just, you need to have options, was basically what they were stressing me about. And I'm so grateful that they did make me take the LSAT, because it was great to have that option. And I've really found like this amazing combination, like you said, Katie, of my law school skills and my J school skills really came together for me in law school. And after I graduate, like Katie said, I'll be working at the Reporters Committee for Freedom of the Press, which is a nonprofit like legal advocacy organization that does exactly what it sounds like, which is representing journalists across free expression and FOIA and all kinds of important work. So yeah, I will be working for them in the fall. And right now I'm just finishing out my third year of law school and doing an internship at Epic, which is a much more concise way to say their name, so you don't have to say it out the whole way, just as a law clerk there. And they do like less free speech, First Amendment work, more privacy and government surveillance work. So I'm actually on their consumer protection team there. But as everyone will probably say, you can't do First Amendment law these days without doing some kind of internet law. So it's a good overlap for me at Epic there.
Great, thank you. Why don't, if we could go back to Rob, who had got his master's at Merrill. And so I'm curious if you could talk about, at what point did you make the decision to go to law school? Just, you've got a lot of degrees there.
Yeah, I think what I find when sort of look back on that point in my life, it was like, well, let's just kind of do things that I'm interested in, or let's just see where this might go. Because I also went to Maryland thinking I wanted to be a sports writer as well, funny enough. And my first job was working part-time collecting sports scores over the phone for the Baltimore Sun. So like, I kind of thought, oh, well, I'll go to J school and be a sports writer. Then maybe I'll go to law school and work at one of these big firms and cash in. But then I didn't really want to do that as law school went on. So then as things developed there, I'm like, well, maybe media law is an option. And now I'm not doing any of those three things. I'm a legal journalist. So I think that, law school is one of those things where if you kind of go in with a plan, you're probably best off of like, what do you want to get out of going to law school? But I think that, the things that, kind of moved me through the various, degrees and school changes over the years have kind of set me up for where I wound up anyway. So I think that, it's always nice to be able to have that flexibility sometimes of knowing that if you if you go to J school and then wind up going to law school, there's a lot of options there. And I went to law school at a time where the legal job market was actually pretty terrible. And, still, there are a lot of things in the process that you can't control. But I think that, just being persistent and keeping at it and trying to have a plan and stick to it for what you want to do for your career does, it can pay off in the long run if you really push it.
So a question that I'll pose to each of you, and I think starting with Janelle, what similarities did you see between journalism school and law school? And do you feel like journalism school prepared you in any way for what you experienced in law school? Yeah, Janelle. Oh, we lost your sound again, Janelle. All right, we'll come back to Janelle. We were having some technical issues with her earlier, so hopefully we'll resolve that and get her back on. But why don't I'll throw that to Brittany in the meantime.
Sure. So there were three main things that I feel that the J School prepared me for law school. That would be confidence. I think that especially being on the broadcast track in the J School, you have to go up and speak to people. I mean, you have to do that either way, whether it's written or broadcast, but being able to just speak in front of people, ask questions in front of large groups of people that are watching you. And because the Socratic method is used in law school, and for those of you that may not know what that is, that's where the professor will ask a question and then they'll just pick someone to answer, whether your hand is raised or not. And so just not being afraid to answer the question, even if I didn't know the answer, I just feel like, building that confidence and the ability to speak in front of other people was key, very key from the J School. Additionally, being able to think outside of the box. So as a journalist, right, you can't just tell this story. I mean, it's not going to be interesting for people. You have to find an interesting way to be able to couch your story and get people interested in listening or reading it. And so that's really important in the legal field generally, right? So being able to critically think and come up with a way that is going to be beneficial for your client or the, against opposing counsel to be able to represent your client well. There is a third thing, and I wrote it down because I knew I'd forget it. Oh, being able, so this kind of goes back to the confidence thing, but just being able to speak in front of other people and speak clearly. And again, like I mentioned earlier, being able to write or speak for a broad audience and not just for those people who might have multiple degrees or have the legal jargon in their background. So I think that those were the main things that I learned from the J School and that prepared me in law school or helped me in law school.
Great, thank you. And I think we have Janelle back.
Yeah, I think so. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm just really gonna Brittany nailed it on the head with that. And I remember her in J School, and it's funny to me that she ever would doubt her confidence because she was such a go-getter there as well. But I will tell you, being able to write gives you a huge leg up in law school. It's hard to overstate that. Being able to write on a deadline, in a timed test, whether you're taking the bar exam or any of your end of year exams, it is a huge game changer. And I really valued that. And that's what the journalism school gave me. I went in to law school, and like I said, I was balancing a lot of things at the same time. I didn't have a lot of time to, play around. And so when you're when you're able to do things quickly on a deadline, whether it's writing an RWA paper, I mean, whatever it is, it makes the world of difference being able to do it in a clear and concise way. And especially when you're reading through some of these more confounded legal opinions, especially early on, you're getting stuff from like the 1800s. Having the ability to take complex material and to boil it down to simple facts that you can then clearly write is huge. And that's what we do as journalists every single day. You know, we're out there, we're interviewing people, we're getting a ton of information from multiple different sources, and being able to kind of in your brain on the fly, prioritize, consolidate, and clearly communicate that, it makes all the difference in the world. So I think being a journalist really makes you a better lawyer, and it definitely helps get you through law school.
Great. Jillian, you're in school right now. Is there anything about law school that has surprised you?
I mean, like both Janelle and Brittany have said, they're so right. The writing, it cannot be overstated. I didn't even understand how far ahead I was of my classmates just by having the journalism foundations that I got at the Merrill College. Like it is far and away the most important part of law school. But in addition, I think the time management aspect of law school is really stepped up from college. You have, I mean, I don't mean to scare anybody, but you have hundreds of pages of reading to get through in an evening, and you need it prepared for the next day. And it's intense. And I definitely took the skills that I learned from college in managing my own time, and you just have to step it up in law school. But those are foundations that I already had from college, which is, I mean, something that I found some of my classmates just didn't.
Rob, was there anything about law school that surprised you or that maybe you weren't prepared for when you got there?
The most surprising thing actually winds up being how little some of it matters until the very end, because many of these law school grades do matter a lot when you're looking for a legal job out of it. Like, whether it's first year, there's career fairs that you right after your first summer, you interview for your second summer, and that can determine what your job is after law school. So it's very heavily weighted toward the first year for a lot of practices, and I thought that was kind of surprising. And I was actually also surprised too at the thing I was saying at the beginning. Your final grade is, for most classes, especially the first year, is determined by one and only one test, your final exam at the end of it. And so what everyone was saying is certainly, I agree with everything that people were saying in terms of writing and clarity of thought and being able to synthesize information into a cogent presentation, and expressing yourself well. But also, sometimes your final exam is 3 hours long, and you have to just sift through complicated fact patterns and use the knowledge you have, with a book or not, and write an issue spotter and write an essay and write something that responds to the prompt on the test, and your entire grade in the class matters. And even at that point, I was a year or more removed from any active journalism writing when I was in law school, but it's still, you still learn how to do that, and you are able to write on deadline so that something makes sense. Or, even now, a lot of the reporters on my team and me were writing about complex litigation. We don't always understand the nuances, but we have to present that to an audience that knows more about it than we do. So there is even an element of, I have to convince you I know what I'm talking about. Maybe I do, maybe I don't. So.
Great. Brittany, why don't let's go back to you. If you could talk, I know you talked a little bit about what you would hope to do when you were in journalism school, and then, deciding to go to law school. What is your career path looked like? What kinds of, while you were in law school, did you do internships, summer associateships? What does that look like? And how did you end up at the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office?
Sure. So when I graduated undergrad, I had a fellowship, the Carnegie Knight Fellowship, that you all may be familiar with. So I did that there at University of Maryland. and I'd already been accepted into law school, and I went to law school. I did some internships while there. I always knew that I didn't want to work at a law firm because, as you might hear, the horror stories of people working 70, 80 hours a week, that's real. And I wasn't,
Those.
see, I was never interested in that. I mean, yeah, you can make a lot of money, a lot of it, but if you don't have time to spend it, I mean, so I just knew that I didn't want to do that. And again, I try to remain related somehow to sports or entertainment because that was my real interest area. So I did, for example, I was an athlete in college. I ran track at University of Maryland. And so I considered the route of compliance, athletic compliance. So I did an internship with that. I did one with the IAAF, that's the International Athletic Association Federation for track. So I was with the dealing with that. That was a great experience. And fortunately, I was able to do it virtually. I know you've probably never heard of like an internship done virtually, probably up until this past year. Maybe they've been doing a lot of it. I don't know. But that was interesting that I was able to do that. I also worked at Octagon, which is a sports representation firm. So I just tried my hand at a lot of things, really staying in that sports entertainment field. After law school, I went and did a fellowship with the National Association of Broadcasters, which really brought back both, of my fields. So it's kind of like an advocacy nonprofit where, they try to fight for journalism rights and broadcast rights, particularly. And so I really enjoyed that, but I kept feeling a passion for copyright and trademark. And so I was trying to get into that field a little bit more. I also, I ended up working at a small firm and opened my own firm with my mom, who's also an attorney, intellectual property attorney. And so we did that. And I also part-timed at another firm where I did general practice, family law, everything, trust and estates. Boring, but some of you might like it. And then I went ahead up to New York and I did insurance defense for Geico for a while. And I actually got to get in the courtroom, which is really early for someone who's recently from law school. But then I got this awesome job here with the PTO. I applied and I got it, came back from New York down to Virginia, and I've been with the PTO. Today is actually my 5th year anniversary today with the PTO. So that was kind of my weird path. Kind of trying to really stay where I really want it to be, but also willing to step out just a little bit to get that other experience. I think that it helps you become a more well-rounded attorney if that's what you want to do.
Sure, that's great. And congratulations on the 5-year anniversary.
You.
Rob, let's go back to you. What did your full career path look like?
I went to Maryland right after college for the master's program. I was an information technology major, which was not something I was interested in making a career out of, but I did, I wanted to be, like I said, I wanted to be a sports writer, but I went to Maryland, had some internships and some part-time work there, like a lot of the master's students do, and then went right to law school from there. Coming out of law school, like I said before too, coming out of law school, I was there when the economy was terrible for the legal jobs. I graduated from law school in 2011, which was kind of in that, there was like a 3 or 4 year block where it was pretty horrible for everyone coming out of law school. And then I wound up clerking for a state judge in Maryland. It was actually the state Supreme Court there. And then I did a year fellowship of the Reporters Committee as well, which we mentioned. And that was kind of thinking, that was, I kind of clerked to try and wait out the economy a little bit. It sort of worked. But then coming out of there, the thought was, I need to be flexible in what I'm doing, given the factors beyond my control. I have a lot of interests. There are a couple of things I can do that I would maybe be interested in coming out of, having this journalism experience and having this law degree now. And I thought, the Reporters Committee path would bring me down toward being a media lawyer. But I also kept the door open to some sort of legal journalism job. And it just happened to be, sometimes you just wind up in a situation where you take the job you get, and that's how I wound up at Bloomberg. But it has worked out pretty well. I have liked working there. I've been there I've been there 7.5 years now. I've had various jobs there. And I do, I think there is something to be said for working in a larger organization, depending, especially if you're in journalism, sometimes because you get exposed to a lot of different subject areas and you can, find something you like, or you find an editor or a manager or someone who will stick up for you and, kind of navigate the things that way. It can be, hard sometimes not to get lost in the shuffle at a big organization, but, if you find you're on that path towards something you like, staying inside something can, create a lot of different opportunities. So.
Great, thank you. I'm just going to make a plug here. If people do have questions, feel free to put those in the chat. I'd also encourage you, since we've got a relatively small group, if you want to just pop your video on and raise your hand and ask questions that way too. We can do that just to make it a little bit more personal. But I thought we'd just go around here, maybe starting with Janelle. What advice would you have for anyone watching, either a student or a recent graduate who might be thinking of going to law school?
I think experience is the best advice. You really have to kind of dig in and see if it's something that you want to do. Whether that is just, maybe spending some time in a law office, if you want to be a lawyer, if you want to use law as a journalist, finding a journalist who is a lawyer and working and kind of shadowing them for a little bit, just to kind of see what it is that your career could look like. I would also say, and I guess this is a plug for Rob, I love listening to law. I listen to the Bloomberg Law podcast on the regular. It's one of my favorite things to do when I'm in the car commuting. And so I listen to that. I listen to the SCOTUS blog podcast. I just really enjoy it. So if you, kind of immerse yourself in that, you can create and kind of dream up what it is that you would do and how you can meld those two things together. And, I don't think you have to limit yourself. So when I was in law school, I, was still working, but I also was able to extern. So I externed with the chief judge on the Arkansas Court of Appeals. I externed at the prosecuting attorney's office and was able to do some time in court on that. And then, worked for another judge. I took a break, and I say break, maternity leave. And then the Court of Appeals needed someone to come in and step in for 8 weeks recently. And so I did that. And worked for a judge there because I just had such a great experience the first time. And when it came back open, they just needed someone to fill in. And so I was happy to do that. And so I think opportunity breeds opportunity. And so the more you go ahead and dig in and find your niche, as Rob said, you can expand where you are and what you can do by the connections you make, as long as you're intentional about it.
Great. How about you, Brittany? What advice would you have?
Sure. So I definitely agree with everything that Janelle said. And I'm just going to add to that. When she said you should be interested, I think you really, I don't know if that can be overstated, because it's a lot, like Gillian said, it's a lot of reading. And it can be really a miserable experience if you're not really into the law and reading cases. I remember just being in law school and some people were like, what did I do to myself? And now I'm in all this debt. So if you're not really interested in it, I don't know if it may be the place for you, because it's 3 years of that. And in addition to that, I don't know, I went straight from undergrad into law school, and maybe some other people might have some thoughts on this, but one thing that I learned is that it may have been better to take a break, like a 1-year break or something like that, get some real world experience, kind of like what Janelle was mentioning, and just kind of getting to understand the world a little bit differently. I think when you're in school forever, kind of, you have this way of thinking, and law school is exactly the opposite of however you've been thinking about school. It's not the same. It's not, read something and be able to regurgitate it and give a little analysis. Like, it's all analysis, really being able to understand cases and apply the law or the case law to a situation. So I think that if you take a year off or two, like some of my friends who were in law school, I feel like they had a different perspective when they were in class, and that they could bring to the table that I didn't necessarily have. I don't know if it was a bad thing. I think I did fairly well, but at the same time, I think that it also could have been beneficial to just take a moment instead of going straight through. So that would just be my recommendation or advice. I would advise that you definitely are interested in it and that you maybe take a moment to see if this is something that you really want to pursue, and just give yourself a chance to explore a little bit. And also, I'll just say this one other thing. When I was actually at the National Association of Broadcasters, one of the attorneys there, she was getting ready to retire, and she said, if I can give you one piece of advice, which unfortunately I didn't follow, she said, before you leave here, while you're on this fellowship, before you have you've started work for real, take like a 3-week or 1-month vacation and just go somewhere, see the world, do something. I'm thinking, are you going to pay for this? But I think that's so right, because once you start working, when's the next time you're going to be able to take off a whole month? When does that happen? So I think that I wish somehow I could have found a way to pay for it and have done it.
That's what the post-bar exam trip is for. I don't know if that's still a thing. When I finished law school, that was the big thing. Like after you took the bar exam, everyone went off to Europe or Asia or wherever for a few weeks before they started their legal job. I don't know if people still do that or not, but Jillian, what about you? What piece of advice would you have for people?
Sure. First of all, the post-bar trip is still indeed a thing. I'm trying to plan one if COVID allows. But I totally second what Brittany said, to take time off, because I did that. I took a year, and I had been a Spanish minor at Maryland. And so I went and taught, like I said, a year of English in Madrid, and I got to travel while I was there, see the world, get all of that out of my system. And so when I came back to go to law school, I felt like this definitely sucks, but I had that whole year. It was amazing. I can buckle down now. I'm ready. And so I would highly recommend taking, I wish I took more time, and more employers that I talked to when I would talk about this in interviews were like, wow, that's so interesting. Tell me more about that. It was something non-legal that we could talk about. And second, I would say, if you're seriously considering going to law school, to make a plan, like everyone is saying, because it is somewhat important that you want to work maybe in the city that you go to law school in. And if you don't want to do that, you sort of need to have some plausible ties to the city that you're applying to sort of make it make sense for an application. And so with me going to school in Philadelphia, but wanting to work here in DC, I needed to sort of explain, I'm from here, I have ties to this area. And it would have been easier for me to get a job in DC if I had gone to a DC school. And so that is just something to think about that I didn't really know. And it's not impossible, obviously, to get a job outside of the city you went to school in, but your school is going to have ties in that city. And so that's helpful for sure.
That's an excellent point. I went to law school in Minnesota, which is where I was from. But when I was applying for jobs, I applied to DC, and I could not get a single interview in DC. And I ended up working in Chicago afterwards because it was the same region, and there were a lot of ties between Minnesota and Chicago. But I think that's a really excellent point in terms of being able to show those ties, or going to law school in an area where you think you want to work afterwards. Rob, there's a question for you in the chat. So I'll pose this to you, and then you could maybe add on any words of advice. But the question is, can you elaborate on how you work as both a journalist and in the law field at the same time? How do you apply your skills from one pathway to another?
Sure. Yeah, I can talk about both of those. I mean, you had given us some, questions and prompts ahead of time, and honestly, this was probably the most important one. And I'd written a big, long answer, but going last, most of what I have on here has actually been said by my fellow very bright thinking panelists here. I think that, my short answer is don't go, but my long answer is go if and only if you have a plan. So it's like taken right out of Jillian's notebook. As well, but there's a lot of factors to consider. Like the geography is a big one. Where some schools have national placement power and some don't. A lot of them are just kind of regional in where their graduates go and get jobs. And do graduates come out of there with jobs? What kinds do they get? And how much debt are you going to take on to do it? Because if someone who's interested in going to law school just you go to a school near the top of the rankings, the law firms come to you, you don't have a lot of, maybe a lot of the people there pick something, well, this is a high ranked law firm, I'll just get my foot in the door there and go from there. That's one path. But a lot of people who work at law firms burn out and they hate it. And they wind up practicing there for a few years and going in-house at a company or going into the government or going into public interest. And that kind of, well, I'll just go and see what happens isn't the greatest plan. And so, there's, once you have that plan and decide you're going to go, what kind of law do you want to practice? What do you want to use that law degree to do? From that point, you try to tailor your internships and externships and all other ships to try and to meet that goal and get that experience. And I think that you can specialize with clinics and other practicum that these law schools do. It's very helpful to kind of get down the career path you want. And I thought that, and as far as I might note about this bar trip too. My bar trip was a weekend at Atlantic City because I had like a week and a half in between jobs when I took the bar and when my clerkship started. So like, it's a nice little indulgence, but if you can't do it, it's not a big deal. But I also liked Brittany's point about trying to take some time off in between. I think a lot of times the fresh graduates, at least, just both in my experience in law school and kind of anecdotally now, the fresh graduates tend to be more of the ones who are, well, I'll just go and see what happens and see what job I get. Whereas folks who have worked for a year or have a master's or, have worked as a paralegal or something, have a better sense of what they're getting themselves into. And, this is very anecdotal, but I do think there was a loose correlation between people who took some time in between and people who are just more satisfied with the whole experience and just are more fulfilled as lawyers now. So anyway, and then this question in the chat too. Yeah, sure. Like I said at the top, I'm a legal journalist, and I don't practice law. My bar membership went inactive and all that. It's strictly a journalism job. But my team covers litigation, and we track lots of alerts and lots of dockets in the federal courts. And all of my jobs at Bloomberg too have had kind of a legal flavor to them. I started by covering securities law, and then I covered the Hill for a bit. And I was editor on our environment section. And I think for all of it, it helps that Bloomberg Law is right in the name of it. Like, we write for a legal audience. Basically every job I've had at Bloomberg, I would have been worse at if I didn't have a law degree, because I had the backing to know how to read legislation and know how to read a court filing and, know how to get that interesting quote out of it. I think we've talked a little bit about how do you synthesize information and then write a lead? Like, that's a very useful journalism thing that ports over to law school very well. But then at least with me going to law school and going back into J school, it ports back in the other direction, because I can, me and my team, we take these things, we have to read through documents, find leads, take this complicated IP, healthcare, trade, all these different topic areas. What's the news? What's the interesting thing here? We're not writing about like a lawsuit that changes venue, but like, a new complaint. We write about motions to dismiss when settlements happen. And for my team now, it's super relevant. But anytime you're covering the federal government legislation or the agencies, the legal stuff is super helpful for that too. I think that, a lot of, in our newsroom, a lot of folks have law degrees and they're pretty well served by it in the kind of legal journalism that we do.
I believe Rob, Jillian, and Brittany, you guys all went full-time to law school, correct? And Janelle, you went part-time, correct? Could you talk a little bit about that experience going part-time, and would you recommend it? Would you not recommend it? How did that play out for you? How long did it take you to get through going part-time? And did you miss out on experiences that, some of your classmates had that you wish you would have had because you were working and going to school?
Right. I'm glad and thankful. I wish more law schools had a part-time program. I think that's actually something a lot of law schools are cutting these days. And it's a disappointment, because I think that I had the benefit of being in a classroom full of part-time students who all, for the most part, worked, during the day. And so you get those interesting perspectives. You have folks who are currently working for law firms that have something to say about, a case that we're discussing and what they're seeing in their law firm. And then you also just have folks, you know, in regular jobs who, you know, decided to go to law school. And so it just really enriched my experience to go part-time. It takes forever. Whereas these guys got to knock it out in 3 years. It took me 5 years to get through. It wouldn't take everyone 5 years to get through. I took summers off and I had a baby in law school as well. So it definitely took me just a little bit longer because of that. But Rob is absolutely right. I think it makes you grateful to be in law school. I never had a moment where I regretted going to law school. And I might just be a super nerdy person. That could be it. But I loved it. I loved learning. I loved my experience. It just made me really grateful to be able to do that and to work at the same time. And so for me, reading those cases wasn't a burden. You know, it gets monotonous. I'm not going to understate that, but it felt like I was doing something and that I was accomplishing something. And it was immediately beneficial. You know, early on, you learn how to read court cases. And so when something would pop up in the newsroom, you know, you had half the journalists starting at the beginning of the court case and like reading through. I'm like, man, I know exactly where to flip here. Go to the end. And so you have to, you know, you want to see what the order is. You want to see it. And so like it makes you more efficient as you're filtering through these ridiculous opinions. You know, sometimes you're able to, like Rob said, go in and pick out the exact nugget, you know, because a lot of the stuff at the top is procedural. And, you know, while you're, especially in broadcast and definitely online, you know, time is important. So if you're the first tweet out there, you're going to get more retweets, right? So if you are wasting your time reading through a bunch of procedural stuff that people don't care about and don't understand, and that's what you're not going to be the first tweet out there. But if you're, you know, a journalist who knows how to read a court case, you're going faster. You're moving to the right portion at the right time. And so I think the advantage is immediate. Without even graduating from law school, you can see benefits of going to law school. And I also do wish more schools would have a part-time program, because I think it allows folks, you know, I wouldn't have been able to go to law school had it not been for that. I wouldn't have given up my job. I wouldn't have been able to put that burden on my family. And so it allowed me to do something that I truly love. I loved law school so much. I didn't even mind studying for the bar. I took off some time to do it, but you know, for me, it was a good experience. I did not get to take a post-bar trip. I wish I would have, though.
And you raise a good thing. I think, you know, people wonder about, you know, everybody hears about the bar exam and this horrible, scary thing that is the bar exam. You know, could you guys talk a little bit about your experience and sort of what your impression was of the bar exam? How did you go about preparing for it? You know, what would you tell someone thinking of going to law school, you know, about what to expect from the bar exam?
You just got to put the time in. There's no magic potion for it. I will say, and I got the top score in my state for the bar exam. So I might have overstudied a tiny bit, but I get asked this question a lot by students now, and have been asked to, you know, at the law school, what did you do? Is there any kind of tips or tricks? And honestly, there isn't. There's nothing. You just go in there, you dedicate the time, you treat it like a full-time job, you know, for that short 8-week period of time, or, you know, some people take a little bit longer. I took 8 weeks and I just treated it like a job, went in there every day and did the work. And if you remain interested, that's the key to learning. If you can't just take a wrong answer. If you take a practice test and you take a wrong answer, like, oh man, I missed that one. You have to figure out why did I miss it? And will I keep missing it? And you have to just go in and dig into the reason behind your errors. But that's what journalism is, right? Like, you have to dig into the reason why, and every time. And that curiosity that you have as a J school graduate or student will propel you through studying for the bar exam.
Brittany, is there anything you'd add to that? I saw you nodding a little bit.
Sure, I definitely want to add something, but I want to also correct something I said earlier. I said the IAAF. I did not work for the IAAF. I work for USATF. I want to clarify. So yeah, so going to the bar exam, so that was very scary for me. I will tell you, I did do the bar prep program. I won't say which one in particular because they're not paying me to advertise for them. But I did do one, and it's like it was 2.5 months or whatnot. And I felt like I was so happy that I did it. But I can tell you, midway through, they give you a midway test, practice test. I failed the midway practice test. I started, I'm looking at Rob, he's like, me too. I started bawling. I called my mom, I was like, I'm not gonna pass the bar. She was like, oh my gosh, like, first of all, chill out, it's a practice. And second of all, we'll fix this. So, you know, and I went home and she and I talked, and somehow I was able to pull myself together. I took the New York bar exam, and I don't know if you guys know, that's considered one of the hardest bar exams in the country. And I passed it on the first try. So thankfully that, you know, that midway test wasn't indicative of what was going to happen. But just like Janelle said, you have to go in with the mindset that this is a full-time job. This is going to be something that you do all day to study and prepare for it. Literally, my friends and I, we didn't even want to meet for lunch. And so my birthday happens to be in June, in the middle of bar prep. And so I'm like, and we always know that I did something big for my birthday every year. And everybody's like, I love you, but we're going to give you 59 minutes. So we went out to eat, and 59 minutes later, we were leaving the restaurant. Like, we were so serious because you really have to dedicate that time and not, so there was like no trips or anything like you normally do in the summer. It was none of that. It was all studying like a real full-time job. And then you can go into that test. Most of the tests, I believe, are 2 days still. And then there are a couple of states like California that has a 3-day test. And so you go in, it's grueling for those 2 days or 3 days, and then you walk out and you're like, I'm done with it. It doesn't matter at this point. There's nothing I can do at this point. So you kind of walk away from it. I will tell you that some people become a little loony, and I always have to tell this joke, sorry. When I was there taking the bar exam, I was in line at the bathroom during one of the breaks. And one of the females that was there, she was saying how she had a job lined up in New York, and she's from Hawaii. One of the other females in line said, so are you going to commute? And we all we were like, from Hawaii? It just tells you that that's how off your mind is and how focused you're just on the bar exam stuff. You don't think about anything else until that exam is over. And then, but it was just so hilarious that when we were like, from Hawaii? So yeah, it's scary, but you can get through it as long as you put in the time and the effort, like Janelle said.
Yeah, well, we've got a few minutes left here. I think Jillian answered Jennifer's question earlier about the gap year experience. But if anyone else has any questions, throw them in the chat now. Otherwise, I think we'll just go around and, we just all good. Thank you. We could just kind of go around and one last, anything I didn't ask you about, anything else that you think people should know that you want to add? Why don't we'll start with you, Rob?
Yeah, I think, you know, if you're gonna take one sentence out of this, you know, what's the lead of this presentation? It's, you know, have a plan if you go to law school. Honestly, that's.
Jillian?
Yeah, completely agree. Obviously have a plan. And something that that I thought about a lot is that the work I'm going into is public interest, and the salary for public interest is not the same salary as big law. So if you know you want to do public interest, go to a law school where you can get a scholarship, because you're not going to be able to pay down that student debt. And so that is just something to think about logically. So all of those things should factor into your plan: the location, the scholarship money, the kind of job you want.
Yeah, that's a great point. Janelle?
I'm going to put a little plug in for the Journalism Alumni Network here. I think what I'd like you to take away from this is reach out to alumni who are doing what you want to do. We're working really hard as on this board to see if we can facilitate that to even a greater extent. But look at the people who you have right here. You know, I'm sure Rob's not going to mind if you shoot him an email and ask him what's going on in Bloomberg law. And, you know, if that's something, maybe you can go over there and see what he does. And I wouldn't mind it. And I just think it's a really great idea to know what you're getting into before you take that jump. And if you do take that jump, if you've already taken it, just know that you have the skills. Marilyn prepared you, and you're not alone. You have a network of people who are there to support you and encourage you. I don't get paid by any of these programs either. I don't think it matters if you take Themis, Adaptabar, Kaplan, but I will go ahead and put I'll put a plug in for Adaptabar because that will help you with the MBE if you take the Uniform Bar exam. That's mostly for you, Jillian. Get that Adaptabar, but everything else, it doesn't matter.
And Brittany, we'll wrap up with you, the one practicing current lawyer in the group. What last word would you like to say?
I agree with everything that was just said. And I would just add that, you know, life is really short if we haven't learned anything from 2020. So really go after what you want to do, whatever's your passion, whatever you enjoy doing. That's what I really encourage you to do. So if you're interested in the law, even if you're not going to practice law, but like in Janelle's case, she's using that as a background for her to understand cases for things she's reporting on, or like Rob, he's doing legal journalism. You know, no matter what it is that you want to do, I would say go after that thing, whatever it is. And going to law school can really help prepare you for other careers as well, because again, you're going to hone those writing skills. You're going to learn how to analyze cases. You're going to learn how to analyze just life situations in and of itself. But I would really encourage that if you are thinking about law school, that you definitely are sure that you can handle reading cases and hundreds of pages every night for 3 years. That's what I would just encourage.
Excellent. Well, thank you all very much. We've come to the end here, but we really appreciate your time and your input talking about these different career options related to law and journalism. For everyone watching, you know, like Janelle said, like all of them said, you know, they're happy to talk to you. Feel free to reach out. You know, I'll reiterate, I think, you know, for the students on the call, so many of our alumni are eager and happy to help you and to talk to you. So definitely do reach out if you know, come across someone on LinkedIn that is doing something interesting that you want to learn more about. You know, definitely feel free to reach out. So I hope to see some more of you on some of the other panels that we're doing later in the week. But thank you again to everyone and have a good evening.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
You guys.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.